Okay, so we're talking about impact management. We failed to do one really important thing, which is to say, what do we mean when we say the word impact? Could you just start with a basic definition of that?
Sure. So impact is a change, and it can be positive or negative. So we're not only looking at positive changes here, but it can be positive or negative, and it's a change that's experienced by people or the planet, the environment. Very simple, right? And so impact investors are investing and attempting to generate a change through their investments, positive change on people or the planet, and alongside a financial return. So I think that the thing to be cognizant of or pay attention to here is that investors also have to pay attention to the negative impacts that they might be creating and kind of manage that possible negative risk as well, as opposed to only focusing on counting the fun things that they are excited about, right?
So I want to pause on that because I think this is really important. Like one of the things is that every single investment we make is an impact investment, arguably. It's just that like when I make a fossil fuel investment, I have a very negative impact on the environment. And I think we sometimes think impact investments all good. And to your point about their positive and their negative, I like to invite people to remember every single investment you make has an impact. Most of them we just don't think about. They are neutral or negative. And so, I sort of feel like I'm on a journey to get everybody to make sure that they know about all the impact in every single thing that they do. And now what we're trying to do is be intentional and positive with it, even though there's all the stuff happening all the time that's impactful.
Right. Well, and I would say that in impact investing, the key difference here is that we are paying attention to the non-financial sort of external impacts that are going on, or externalities as they would call them in an econ class, right? Where we're actually internalizing them. We're saying this also matters. We are going to count this. We are going to measure this. We're going to set targets around this. And so that's the journey that, we've been in, is to figure out, okay, yes, we're impact investors. And how do we count all of this? And how do we measure all of this? And how do we manage it?
Wonderful. So we're taking responsibility for everything, not just the enterprise we invest in, but its effect on the world around it.
Yes. And there can be unexpected effects that you didn't know were going to happen, and suddenly,
all the time.
and there can be, predicted kind of premeditated effects, both positive and negative, and then you can also be managing downside, right? Which you might manage financial downside. You're also managing impact downside as well.
So you mentioned Impact Management Project bringing forward these very simple 5 dimensions of impact. Could you walk us through that, please?
Sure. So these dimensions are what, who, how much, the contribution, which we'll get to in a second, and then risk, which I was just alluding to now. It seems almost silly to say, like, this is what we mean by impact, but actually it's really important to define these things so that impact investors are all speaking about the same thing, and that they're really defining their impact using these dimensions every time they're talking about their impact. So what is pretty straightforward. When you have an investment and you are hoping to, you have an investment into a business that is creating math games in order for children to learn math, right? A math app and some interactive games. We have an investment in a company like that. And so the outcome is children learning math, right? This is the what. Who experiences the outcome? The who is these children, and you would know the ages of the children, how underserved those children might be. So it's important. It's not just any children. It might be children that are, have lower math scores, or from districts that, don't do as well on standardized tests, things like that. How much? Now, it's not just counting children. It's not just how many. But it is how much of this outcome across scale. So that's how many. Depth, how much math are they learning? And duration, the time period for which. So it could just be a one-time workshop and then they never interact with this again, and maybe they learned one thing. But if it's an ongoing application of this math learning experience, and it's fun and engaging, and they can do it over time, the duration will be longer and the depth will be longer as well, or better, deeper. Contribution. Now, this is interesting because there's contribution from an enterprise perspective and also contribution from an investor perspective. I'd like to focus more on the investor perspective today, but you can see on the slide an enterprise's contribution to the outcome. So what would have happened if this enterprise just didn't exist at all? Kind of counterfactual, right? For an investor, I like to think about it as, how can we think about if we didn't make this investment? Were there other investors that would have come in anyway and made the exact same investment of us? Doesn't really matter if we invested or not. Our contribution is lower. If there was nobody else who was going to fund this company and we are standing in the gap and funding them early or providing them assistance early, that is strong contribution.
Is that very, very similar to additionality, where we talk about you want to be additional to what the market would have done anyway? If the market would have done it anyway, it's not additional. If the market wouldn't have done it and you come in and do it, it's additional, and therefore it's an impact investment?
Yes, this is analogous with additionality. And I think that the thing around, or the important piece with additionality or contribution here is that there's many different ways to think about it in terms of, or many different ways to affect it. So you might have, there's your money, right? So you put your money in, great. But what other ways are you providing value to this business that is contributing to its success? And if it wasn't if it wasn't Boston Impact Initiative making this investment and providing all of the wraparound services that we do, would they have been as successful as if they had just gotten money? So that piece of additionality, or in this case, the way they talk about it as contribution, is very important, and I think important to remember. There's many different factors to it, and then finally, risk, which you think about risk as something that is financial. You might lose all your money. But risk can also be an impact factor as well. And so the risk to people, the environment, that this investment will not pan out how we thought it would, either that, and we can look at different risk factors, either that there's not enough evidence to find out, what really is happening here. It's too difficult to collect evidence. There might be something external happen. Maybe there's a global pandemic and everything gets shut down, right? The playgrounds got shut down during the pandemic. If this math app and installations are happening at playgrounds and suddenly nobody can go to playgrounds, it's not the investor's fault. It's not the companies, the social enterprise's fault, but that's a risk that exists. It's out there. Several other risks here. Execution risk. Might be a great idea, might not happen the way that it should, and therefore the impact does not pan out as it should. And then I'd say alignment risk is also a really important one to highlight here, which is just the probability that the impact is not baked into the model. When we make impact investments, we try really hard to make sure that, even if things change, right? If there's a choice that has to be made, that it's not between impact or the business, right? That it's not that the business thrives on and is working together with the impact.
I mean, that's a big one in assessment, right? Because we've had many entrepreneurs come and say, absolutely, I'm an impact business, and you have to scratch the surface and really see, is that just spoken? Or is it built in, and if something is disrupted in the economy, in the market, et cetera, how committed are they to that? We've found that sometimes it's completely clear that entrepreneurs are 100% committed to impact. It's why they started the enterprise. Mm-hmm. And there are those who are like, maybe I can attract some impact capital if I spin it this way.
Right. It makes me think about an investment that we have in a food manufacturing company that was really interested in creating local jobs. And actually, it was really easy for them to create local jobs in their neighborhood because people literally walked to the manufacturing plant in order to be able to work there. And they were located in a neighborhood that was mostly people of color and also, lower income, many of them immigrants. And so this was the demographic that we were interested in investing to create jobs for. And then this company was in the neighborhood, with these jobs that are, easily trained. People can easily be trained on them. And so it really was baked into their model. Just a follow on to that, they've recently moved. And so how do we work with that? They've actually decided this is so important that they are busing the people that they were working with in their neighborhood. They've gotten a transportation company, and people are coming to their new factory on the buses. And it is just a cost that makes sense because people are well-trained, and this is the demographic that they want to work with. So before, it was easy and they were doing it really well. And now they have realized that this is the work that they want to do and the demographic they want to work with. And they've trained people, and they have this loyal workforce, and they are coming on buses, and it's working out great.
Oh, so it's a great example of doing rigorous due diligence around the intentions of the entrepreneurs and their values, right? Do they care? And we believe that these entrepreneurs cared so deeply that in a moment like this, they would stay in alignment with the impact that they committed to.
That's right.
Great. Okay, what else is a risk?
Right, so a few other risks that I'll mention. So drop-off risks, I think are important to consider. Just that, the business might be in a phase right now where there's going to be a lot of impact, and then later, not so much. This could happen in a business that, in its early stages might generate a lot of employment or generate different opportunities that then later on, just within the business model,
gets disrupted by AI and the jobs go away.
Oh my gosh, yes. We're going to see what havoc AI wreaks on this. But yeah, drop-off risk can also just be that it's not baked into sort of the long-term plans of the business as well. There's 9 total. I think that the other one that might be important to go into is the stakeholder participation risk. So if there's often well-meaning entrepreneurs who are like, I am going to come and do this thing in this place. I have this great idea. And then they don't actually take into account the people that they're going to be working with on the ground. So the intention is there, but they haven't done their diligence in terms of meeting with community. And we talk about this a lot. Who are you in relationship with? How are you thinking about your stakeholders and the different people that you need to be in relationship with in order to make this business work? And so that is something that can really come up and surprise some investors. I would say that at BII, we vet this particular risk early on and carefully.
It's actually something that ties back to other material we've talked about, which is in the process of identifying the opportunity, the shared priorities. When a community works hard to identify its shared priorities and the investors understand the community's shared priorities, then we're going to mitigate stakeholder risk. If the community's voice has never been part of that, that'll be a bigger challenge.
Right.
So that's a lot of risk to manage. I mean, I look at that, it sort of feels a little overwhelming. How do you, as an impact director, how do you manage all of those concerns simultaneously?
Yeah, I mean, so just from a practical kind of process viewpoint, when we are assessing an investment, so in the due diligence phase, early on, we start to identify these risks, just like we would identify any business risk, strategic risk, operational risk that might exist in the business from a financial or business perspective. We're also identifying these impact risks. We actually include them in our investment memo, and we include potential mitigants. So how might we, if we've identified that there is an existing risk, before we even make the investment, we need to already be strategizing about how to mitigate that risk. One way to mitigate them, if the investee or the business is on board, is through impact covenants, which we'll talk about. Another one is, through setting goals with investee, it doesn't have to necessarily be impact covenants, but sort of setting goals and understanding, like working with them to understand the risk and understand how they might mitigate it through business processes or through operations. And so there's there's a few different ways to do it, but we try to identify them early. They do pop up, of course, like all risks. They do pop up right in the middle of investment or at inconvenient times, but we do keep our eyes on it.
Great. So let's get pragmatic here and start to turn to how we do due diligence with an impact lens.